Welcome to Chronicles of Old Singapore. This is Dr Loh KS, and I speak to people on their memories of Singapore before it became a global city. Do like the video and subscribe for future episodes. This will help us a lot. My guest today, Hidayah Amin, is here already, and she's smiling at my introduction for some reason. How are you, Hidayah?
Hello, Kasing. Long time no see or hear.
I
I
think
mean, I see you on Facebook, so.
it has been 3 years. Yeah? 3 years.
Yeah, is it 3 years? The
Since we
last time
met.
when
Yeah,
I
yeah.
came to
Two and a
US?
half or 3 years.
Yeah.
Of course, Hidayah, her name and her reputation has always been connected with a particular part of Singapore, which is going to be our topic today, which is Kampong Glam. I think I first heard about you when you published the book on your house, right? Growing up in Gedung Kuning. I was in the Singapore Heritage Society then, and Kevin, the president, then mentioned the book coming out, and I think some plans to kind of promote the book with SHS.
Yeah, so I wrote Gedung Kuning, Memories of a Malay Childhood. And Singapore Heritage Society was the co-publisher because I couldn't get anybody to publish. Yeah, that's the story. And then because I believe in the book, maybe a lot of the book came out in 2010, and during that time there weren't many books about public history and personal narrative. And when I wanted to publish it, one of the publisher that I approached didn't think it has commercial value. But of course, I argue, stories like this are not meant for commercialization. It's more of documentation of Singapore's history. And then I talked to Dr. Chua Eileen, and because she's a friend of mine, I was ranting and telling her about this book project, this that I have. And then she said, "Oh, why don't you talk to Kevin? He's the president of SHS then." And that's why I met up Kevin. That was, in fact, the first time I met him. And then I told him about this, and he said that why not? SHS help you because it's something to do with like Singapore heritage. And I think it is the first book that that was written about Malay, to give a different side of Malay history from a personal viewpoint in English. I think before that I couldn't find any similar like story in Singapore. I'm talking about in Singapore. Maybe in other regions there are Malays writing about their family stories in their own in Malay, but in Singapore I don't I couldn't find such stories. So and hence I'm not saying I'm trailblazing, but I think I'm quite glad that Kevin actually agreed to help. In fact, uh, the whole purpose was to actually document this piece of story that nobody has heard about and correct some some maybe perception
Misconceptions. Yeah.
yes, misconceptions and all that. Yeah, so thank you, Singapore Heritage Society, for believing in like a lay person like myself who believed in in documenting personal stories, family memoirs, because these are equally important uh in my opinion to get a sense of how society was like. Yeah.
You're far too modest, Hidayah. I mean, I want to talk about writing books on Singapore's memory and heritage and the struggles involved later on. But I think for now, what you said, right? Like this combination of historical documentation and the personal side of history is very important. I agree, and this is really what Chronicles of Old Singapore is about. It's about memories, but it's also about trying to put that memories, as part of the history of our country. Like people's memories are not just, like nostalgic trivials, but they actually matter a lot. You put them all together, we have kind of the social history of Singapore, right? So let's begin. Hidayah, tell us about your origins and your connections with Kampong Glam.
Okay. People have a lot of misconception about me when
Hmm.
they look at
More
my
misconceptions.
yeah. They look at my address. Actually, on my birth certificate was written 73 Sultan Gate, which is the address of Gedung Kuning.
Yes.
So I was born at home. I mean, during our time, right? Babies were delivered in Kadang Kebau,
Yeah.
but my mother insisted on delivering me at home. And hence I think that was why there was a strong connection between me and Gedung Kuning and of course Kampong
Mm.
Glam. But our family history went back a long, long time ago.
Mm.
In fact, when people ask me, "Oh, where were your family from?" I'm like, "What are you saying? My family has always been in Kampong Glam. I mean, it's been in Singapore, because my great grandfather Haji Yusoff, he was born in Singapore, uh, in 1855. I mean, that's like just like a few decades after Raffles came, right?
Mm.
So if people ask like, where were you originally? I'm like, Singapore, because that's it. I mean, it just goes quite far. So maybe those who do not know about my great grandfather
Mm.
Haji Yusoff, he was one of the early Malay pioneers and entrepreneurs. In fact, he was the one who created the belt that people use to go on the Hajj. So he was the creator of the Hajj belt in 1880. So after he came back from Mecca, then he had this idea to create the belt. And if you have Muslim friends in Singapore, a lot of them when they go to the Hajj, they will still wear the belt. Unfortunately, the belt that exists today are not the original belt, because over the years, uh, people kind of then there were people who actually, I would say, stole his ideas. So they make their own version of belts, during that time there was, I mean, patent. I mean, of course, nobody thinks thought about this, like copyright issue and all that, because this was in the early years, right? And
Mm.
even though my great grandfather had like the label says trademark, but there were stories of people copying his ideas and all that. So the belt business eventually died off because
Mm.
he diversified into other business. So that was the connection that he had with Kampong Glam, because Kampong Glam was a pilgrim hub.
Did Haji Yusoff leave behind like a collection of things, from his time to your time?
Yes, I
Mhm.
mean, that's why you all have to visit the Haji Yusoff Memorial Museum to
Okay.
see. Yes, I mean, maybe some of you do not know this, but I set up a museum called the Haji Yusoff Memorial Museum to commemorate, his legacy. It's a private museum uh on Jalan Pinang. In fact, at the corner of Jalan Pinang, facing the mosque, is on the third floor.
Mm.
So, and we are open on the last Saturday of every month from
Right.
12 to 6, yes.
It-
So, I mean, and of course, at the museum, we showcase about the history of Kampong Glam as a pilgrim hub,
Mm.
and of the connection to my family. And we actually showcase some of the paraphernalia that, like the original belt cloth,
Mm.
which was actually imported from Germany, and it's more than 100 over years, but it's
Ah.
the cloth is still very good, and the trademark rolls and all that. So we actually showcase some of this in the museum. So if anybody is interested,
Oh.
do come down, and you will, unlike other museum, you will have a free curated tour. And people who have visited the museum, they actually said they enjoyed it. It's not a big space, but it's very personalized. It's like a living museum, and you learn much more, not only about like our family, but Kampong Glam in general.
Great, fantastic. I'll put a link to the page for the museum and the tour below, right, in the description. Hidayah, tell us about the house that you grew up in, the Yellow Mansion. I mean, this was kind of a remarkable place, right?
Yes,
Mm.
in fact, I mean, to me, when I was growing up, I never thought of it or thought of my family as special, or People thought that we are royalty because we live in such a grand mansion, but actually we are not. We're just ordinary Singaporean.
Uh,
So how this Gedung Kuning, it was built in after they built the Istana Kampong Glam. This is just adjacent, and Gedung means like mansion or a very big place in Bahasa Melayu, and yellow kuning is yellow.
mm,
So and yellow is the color of royalty. So the house was actually built for like the royal family. So the king, have the palace, the Istana Kampong Glam, the Sultan had the Istana Kampong Glam, and then the Gedung Kuning was meant to house the prime minister or the bendahara of the Malay royal court. So that was the original purpose. That's why sometimes if you look at newspaper articles, they say, oh, rumah bendahara or house for the prime minister. Yeah. Unfortunately, of course, if you know history, there's no Malay royal court in Singapore. So the house was known as Gedung Kuning after the Yellow Walls. So one of the sultans, like maybe one of the son or the descendant lived there. So technically, it was part of the Malay royal grounds. So that's why it's quite majestic and all that, because it's not meant for ordinary people to stay. It's meant for the prime minister. But throughout the course of history, the house reverted to private property. In 1907, it reverted to private property, and my great grandfather, I'll just call him Haji Yusoff for easy reference. So
right.
he lived in behind Gedung Kuning, Kandahar Street. So that he realized one day that, how come there were like new tenants, so called? There's no like Malay royalty living there. So he asked the new tenant who were Indian moneylenders, the chettis.
Chetties,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so they lived there, and then he asked, hey, how come you all are here? Because I thought the royal family lived here. I said, oh, we already bought the place. So he was quite surprised, right? This was in 1912. So he was, and he said, oh, you mean you can buy this house? I said, yeah, we bought it. So according to my grandmother, who was his eldest daughter, so he felt it was such a waste for like a piece of Malay land, right, or Malay history to fall into non-Malay hands. So he asked the owner, say, I want to buy from you. Would you sell it to me? But of course, then they look down on Malays because they think Malays are like very poor. So the Indians, I mean the Chettias, they say, okay, if you sure you can buy, but it will cost $37,000 and you have to pay cash. So typical of moneylender. Very Shylock, very like mean. So
Yeah.
can you imagine $37,000
Yeah.
in cash in 1912?
Yeah.
It's like equivalent. You take out a few millions. I give you a few millions in cash. But you have to understand during that time, the banking system wasn't, properly in place. And of course, in and of course, Haji Yusoff, I mean, we are Muslims, and he especially was a very religious man, and he didn't believe in interest and all this, So to him, it must, yeah, he didn't believe in like interest and all that. So when the Indian moneylender said, okay, $37,000 cash. But he wanted, I think when my grandmother said the motivation for him to buy the house was so strong because he felt that he wanted to save a piece of like Malay history from becoming, whatever that it could have become. So he said, okay, I will buy it. So all these are in the title deeds. I mean, in the land, you can see the conveyancing details. So he bought it in 1912 for $37,000 cash, which is a lot of money. So yeah, that was
Right.
how we came to stay in the house.
So for the next up to the 1972 when you were born, 60 years, the family was still staying there.
Yes, but
mm.
in between, there was like 6 years difference, where Haji Yusoff, he had to sell the house. I mean, I didn't know this
Mm.
until later on when I was doing research, because if you remember about the Great Depression,
Ah, yes.
and yeah, and of course his business took a hit
Mm, mm,
as
mm,
well, and he needed money to generate the business, and then he felt, okay, the only way is to just to sell off this house. So he sold it to a Chinese owner. That was, I think, in 1919. Yeah, 1919. So until 1925. So a total of 6 years, it belonged to a Chinese. And if
right.
you notice, that is where there was some Chinese influence in the house. Like for instance, if you notice, there's two eagles, right, outside the house.
Yes.
Yeah, because for us, we don't believe, I mean, for Muslims, we are not supposed to keep all these figurines, in the house, because like idol worship or what. We are not supposed to, but I always wonder why there was these two eagles outside. So I suspected it's because of
Yeah,
the Chinese family.
yeah.
And if you look at the Peranakan Museum, you see the same eagle outside, exactly, but it's in blue. And if you notice, Kasing, the painting on the wall, that's the eagle.
Okay.
Uh, because I lost my house, right? So my artist friend painted a picture of my beloved eagle to kind of remind me of home. Because in between there are actually two Chinese family, and it's quite interesting that how later on Haji Yusoff regretted selling the house. He kind of regretted selling the house to the Chinese, and he wanted
Mm.
it back.
He bought it
But in
back.
between,
Yeah.
because
Mm.
he sold to Cho So San. That's the first on in 1919, and then he repurchased it from Oi Chong Swan and Ho Kien Huan Yu. I think they were Peranakan. I mean, from the names, so
Mm.
that's why you have some Peranakan influences in the house, which the family decided to just let it be. So he bought he repurchased the house from this couple in 1925. Then I noticed that he purchased it on 28th July, which is my birthday. I mean, not that it has any significance, but like
Okay.
so then we don't know how much he purchased it from, but according to my grandmother, the Chinese family didn't want to sell it to him.
Mm.
Again, they always look down on Malays, thought that he's a poor Malay man, but somehow he managed to get it back. And from 1925 until the government took the house, 1999, by Land Acquisition Act, the family have been staying in the house.
I mean, so you mentioned twice already, right? This kind of bias towards the Malays.
Yes.
So this is something that kind of drives you and is part of your writing as well. That Malays are
Uh,
not necessarily poor and backward, right?
Yes, because
Yeah.
if you look, I mean, I wasn't interested in history. I mean, that's
Mm,
for sure. I
mm,
didn't, but later on, because of what happened to my family, and after writing or researching on my own family history,
mm,
basically, I didn't want to write. I mean, the honest to goodness truth is that I was already like a producer. I was enjoying my job.
mm.
That who
You were in the
and
media, is it?
Yes, I was in the
Uh.
media, and then I only wanted to do one book, the Gedung Kuning, because I wanted to tell the real story about
Mm,
our family. Because people forget who are the owners. They kept saying, "Oh, it's part of the Istana." Since when? 1907. And then there's other people who stays there, and our family stayed there the longest. And then and about Haji Yusoff, and about what he had done for the community of Kampong Glam and all that, his contribution to the Sultan Mosque, but nobody knows about all this. So I felt then the narratives wasn't really accurate.
Mm.
Even now, if you go to our normal like museums, other like state museum, I don't think the Malay narratives were put forefront. And I felt that it's unfair. You see, like people think that the Malays don't contribute to nationhood and all that,
Mm.
and we are just fishermen, uh,
Mhm.
postmen, and sailors, or whatever. That's always depicted in history
Or
books.
even worse, right? That the Malays like a burden, right?
Yes,
Mm.
yes. So like so I felt that, and I mean we come from a mercantile family. Even my father's side, they were, when his great grandfather came over here from Kalimantan, they were trading in diamonds. They were the Banja diamond merchants. So how could you say that Malays are like fishermen, postmen, and all this other like do menial job that
Mm.
we are not of the mercantile class.
Mm.
So, and I felt very strongly that I wanted to write about it through the family. And of course, I wasn't, I don't know how to go about doing it. So I started looking at other books, other similar like books
Mm.
written by Chinese, see how they
Yeah.
write. So I decided, you know what, I'm a storyteller, right? So why don't I just write it as if I'm writing a story? Just tell them the story. And
Yeah.
of course, in between, you put in a little bit of nuggets of history.
Mm.
Because, I mean, frankly, who reads academic books? I mean, when I was a
You
student also,
did.
but you know what I mean? The lay
Yes,
person, right?
yes.
Like, if you
Of
ask me to
course.
read journal, I'm like, oh my God, it's so
Mm.
sleepy
Mm.
and boring. I mean, there's a lot of information and people don't write very clearly. That's one thing. I mean, of course, a lot of respect for the
Mm.
historians and the
Mm. Mm.
academics to
Mm.
do a lot of good work. But I'm just saying that these works do not translate to layman's language.
Mm. Sure.
And for me, the most important thing, like what you're doing, Kasing, which is very
Mm.
good,
Mm.
that you're doing this and you're talking to ordinary people,
Mm.
telling, the experience, which is
Mm.
very priceless.
Mm.
Like you don't hear this in the books, the personal touch. So the way I wrote Gedung Kuning, and to some aspect Kampong Glam, you'll see there's a lot of personal stories. The way I wrote it in a very simple way, because the idea was I want my own auntie with basic English comprehension to read it. So that was my objective. I want my makcik, my uncle, my auntie, who are not like scholars, so that they are also able to enjoy these stories of their childhood, of their past. So that was how I wrote Gedung Kuning. And I think the reception was quite good. Like people enjoy, because it's like they even my own Malay friends said that, hey, I never know Malay. There's this group of Malays, or like your
Mm.
great grandfather, your family, and all that. So it gives another side of history which they do not know. Like, and
Mm.
how even this Haji Yusoff, right? He inspired a whole lot of like the Hajj belt is being used until now. I mean,
Mm.
he was so successful that he earned a moniker. The moniker was Haji Yusoff Tali Pinggang. Tali Pinggang means belt.
Right,
So
right.
Haji Yusoff, the
Yes.
belt merchant. Yeah.
Mm.
So, and he's able to, I mean, he was wealthy enough to purchase Gedung Kuning, just like in cash, no doubt. On top of, yeah, all this. So I felt there's this part of history that people need to know, and you need to feel very proud that Malays are also contributing to Singapore's progress, not only the
Mm.
Chinese,
Mm. Mm.
and it is sadly lacking. And that was the main motivation, I would add. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, it's important. That's where history has a positive social role, right? To break these stereotypes about the different stories in our history, and especially when it kind of covers up some of the minority contributions. I think that is where historians have a job to do. And if historians are not doing that job, then people like Hidayah has to come in and help us, with their research and writing. So that's wonderful. Can you kind of describe this house? It's called the Yellow Mansion. Was this huge?
Yes, it
Mm,
was. It is, I think there was about 10 rooms, but
mm,
of course, some of the rooms are quite big that it is split,
yeah.
into they make like 2 rooms from 1 room because it was really very big. But as in the as in the whole area is about, let me see how big it is. I think 13,000 plus.
13,000 square
Yeah,
feet, meters, square
square
feet,
feet. Bigger, right? The meters.
smaller. So that's
Oh,
about
wait. Let me see. Let me check the.
oh no, that's big. That's like 13 HDB, right?
Yeah, something like.
Mm,
Then we have like a garden, and the most important is the strategic location. Look at where the location is. It is nestled in the middle of Kampong Glam, next to the mosque,
mm,
which is very important for Haji Yusoff because being a religious Muslim, he wanted to live near the mosque. So he will go there for prayers all the time. So if you notice, some of the other properties that he had were all located near the mosque.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
It's
I
been
mean, this is also a different, perspective. Like some
yeah.
people, they like to live, near the like beachfront, but to him, the decision was, where was the mosque?
It's being conserved, right? It's what it is today is still the original facade.
Yes.
Uh,
So,
mm,
fortunately, when the government took it, it was supposed to be part of the Malay Heritage Center,
mm,
and they conserved the building. So fortunately, I know some people whose childhood home got possessed, and then it turned into a condo, and there's
mm,
no, there's nothing for them to remember it by. A good example is the Sekolah Kota Raja, the Kota Raja Malay School.
mm,
Now is Boss Hotel. I mean, and I actually put it in my book. I mean, why can't they preserve the building? And then your Ministry of what, Foreign Affairs or MCI, what can move there?
mm.
I mean, at least maintain a little bit of the structure, And now it's just odd looking hotel, like I don't know how many stories, which is quite an eyesore in Kampong, in the area.
Yeah.
But you have a wonderful architecture. Why do you have to destroy it?
Mm,
You can preserve it, right? Like how they preserve all these buildings in England.
yeah. I mean, these stories are far too common, unfortunately. What
Yeah.
are
It
what are
is
your
quite
memories of growing up in Gedung Kuning?
okay. So even though I don't grow up in your typical kampong, as in
Yeah.
atap and all that, but we do have our own. We are just like any other like children. We play in the garden. We play masak-masak. I mean, whatever childhood game we played it, and because the house, there were a lot of like fruit trees, so there's also a lot of climbing. Rambutan tree, papaya, of course, mango tree. There's a very big quinine tree, rose apple tree, jambu.
Mm,
So, banana tree. And I think is the also the interaction with other. Okay, so I with other members of the community,
mm-hmm,
uh, when they come to the house for Hari Raya, or because my great grandfather had this tradition that every year he have this howl. That means it's called a period of a year. So every year he will invite the residents of Kampong Glam to come to Gedung Kuning to makan. Of course, there's some Thanksgiving prayer, and then you will eat. There's eat good food, then mingle. It's just like your family, your neighborhood bonding. So
mm,
every year we will do it at the house. So I get to see the other people. But also in terms of people my age then, right? I because my parents waited a long time before I was born,
Mm.
and I was quite precious. So I was not allowed to go venture on my own outside the gates of Gedung Kuning. I mean,
Uh,
for whatever reason, for safety, or because it's like their child, very precious. What if kena kidnapped? Because during that time, in the 1970s, there's a lot of kidnapping cases
yes, yeah,
also.
yeah.
Right, and they do not want all this, so I was quite protected in that sense. But I enjoy like living in Kampong Glam because of the communal
Mm.
experience. Like even people who live in Bustra Street, if even until now, right? When I don't know them because they are like different generation, but somebody will say, hey, her mother is Cik Ya, or the grandmother is apa ni Kak Tima, then they were like, oh, you are so and so, blah blah blah, and then they suddenly, they become very friendly. There's
Mm.
this very unseen communal spirit, which even until now, when everybody no longer live in Kampong Glam, so I find the bond is very strong.
Mm. So
And it was, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. So we are the same age actually. So we were talking about growing up in Kampong Glam in the 70s and early 80s. So this
Mm.
is after Singapore's independence already, and when the rest of Singapore was developing quite quickly, right? So
Yes.
in that era, tell us who were the Malays living in Kampong Glam compared to, let's say, the original Geylang Serai? I mean, what was the community like?
Who are the Malays?
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
what do you,
like what was their
famous Malays who live in Kampong Glam?
profile in terms of like
Okay.
social class, maybe? Or
Okay.
mm,
You have actually, it's not, there is no class system
mm, mm,
in Malay,
mm,
you don't have any caste system or whatever. But it's quite a good mix of people who live in Kampong Glam.
mm,
You have those who are hawkers.
mm,
In fact, our former Speaker of Parliament, Abdullah Tamugi,
uh-huh,
used to live in Palembang Street, right? And the father was he was a hawker selling mee rebus. So you have from like those who are like selling
mm,
food, to those who owns business like Haji Yusoff, to those who are tailors or sewers, or
mm,
involved in the cottage industry. So it's a whole spectrum, and those who were involved in the Hajj trade. So you can't say, I mean, it's a whole wide uh, variety
mm,
of professions
mm,
or
mm,
people, and they lived in like this kampong lah, so
mm,
called.
mm.
So there
W-
is no like, now you see only the rich people stay in Orchard Road, example,
mm, mm,
or Nassim Hill, or no. But in Kampong Glam, you have the very rich. You also have the not so wealthy, all live together and working alongside,
mm,
quite
mm.
peacefully.
Mm-mm. Would you say then, because of the location, right, of Kampong Glam, that these were the more kind of urban, cosmopolitan Malays? I mean, you wouldn't have like the farmers or fishermen in that area, right?
Yes, you
Mm-mm.
wouldn't, but then right, in
Mm,
the 18 hundred, they were like even like a pig farm, in Kampong Glam itself. Yeah, so of course, during our time, like post, maybe before independence, post independence, you don't have the farming land, so called. It's urbanized because of the locality.
mm,
And because of the locality also, that there were a lot of people from, I mean, the would-be pilgrims, right? They will come to Kampong Glam and stay there before
mm.
they take the ship off Tanjung Pagar to go on the Hajj.
Ah,
So you see, in
yeah.
that sense, Kampong Glam is quite cosmopolitan, because you have all this inflow of people coming in from the 1840s, to kind of like, these are not say transient, your tourists, so called, but they are there for a purpose, because they want to go on the Hajj. So they come to Kampong Glam, they stay in
Yes.
the shop houses, like lodging.
Okay.
Like because if you look at Kampong Glam, like the shop houses, so you have the beds on which is quite big. The rooms are actually quite big, the space. So they were these were used as lodging for the would-be pilgrims. So they will
Mm.
stay on.
Could you
Yeah.
say where were these shop houses?
Oh,
Which street?
where
Uh, okay.
Busra Street,
Mm.
and then you have Haji Lane. Why do you think the name Haji Lane came
Mm,
from?
mm, mm, mm.
Right? Because of this Hajj,
Yeah, right.
would-be pilgrims who used to stay in Kampong Glam.
I mean, the
Uh,
pilgrimage is something that goes back to the colonial years, right? So there
mm.
must have been like an industry that grew up to service this trade, right? Mm,
I okay. As far as I know, the reason for, of course, Singapore central location
mm,
makes it easy. I mean, people to come here, and then, of course, with our deep harbors and our the shipping line, uh, so it's natural for people in Southeast Asia to come to Singapore.
mm,
Although those they have there are some would be pilgrims who embark. I mean, they from Penang, because Penang is also a harbor.
mm,
But you have the majority, a lot of people from Indonesia, the Dutch East Indies, right? They will come to Singapore because then the Dutch had very strict laws against prohibiting like the would-be pilgrims to go on the
mm,
Hajj. Not because of, I mean, based on what I've read, it's not because the Dutch do not want you to perform your religious obligation or whatever. They couldn't be bothered what you believe in anyway. But they are afraid that when people, when their own so-called, not say citizens, the so-called Indonesians, when they go and they meet other people, when you go on a Hajj, you meet so many people all over the world. And when you meet people, you have discourse, right? You talk, you chat, and then you have ideas, and then
mm,
maybe somebody will say, you're still under Dutch rule. How come you all never do want to fight? Or people will give you ideas. So that's why the Dutch kind of control this movement.
mm,
So how they go about doing it was they say, oh, they are going to Singapore only. So that's why the Dutch allow it. So then a lot of like Indonesians from the Indonesia islands, the people in the Indonesia islands, they will come to Kampong Glam and stay for the so-called the Hajj season. And then that's the same way they will go to Mecca from Singapore, they come back to Singapore, and then they will return back to Indonesia. And that was also one of the reason why there's a lot of people of Indonesian origin who stayed in Singapore.
mm.
Like how Haji Yusoff family came to be. They all came here because they wanted to go on a Hajj.
So are you saying in your time there were still people on the pilgrimage coming to Kampong Glam?
No, I think
Uh,
during it declined in
okay.
1980.
Okay.
Yeah, so people were already taking the plane.
Right. Right.
I'm just
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
how, in the past, how it was. But
Mm,
in the 1970s, there's still people coming to Kampong Glam.
mm,
So in the 1980s, when, the plane system was more established, people started taking the plane
So that is
instead.
one aspect of Kampong Glam that has changed lah, since from that
Yeah, yes,
1980s
yeah,
period.
yes, yeah.
In the time that you were there, 70s and 80s, was Kampong Glam changing also? Before it was declared a conservation area, what were some of the kind of changes that were taking place as you can remember it?
Mm, I think maybe there's more development,
Mm-hmm.
like the concourse. They started, where the concourse, the
Yeah,
building, right?
yeah. Mm,
I remember it was being built when I was growing up. So, and there were more like high-rise building around. And then Blanco Court, there was still Blanco Court. If you remember, where Raffles Hospital is now.
mm, mm,
So then it was still there, but it got demolished later on if I'm not mistaken. Uh, so the modernization, I guess, the
Yeah.
building of
Mm.
concrete, not, I wouldn't say, because the shop houses in Kampong Glam are concrete, but more high-rise buildings. And
Yeah.
then you could see people started to leave Kampong Glam, the residents in Busra Street, because most of them did not own the shop house. So, or even those were, they become adults, right? So when they started working, they moved out, as in out of Kampong Glam to start their own family, or to live in HDB and all that.
Were there cases of eviction and the kind of being made to leave because the shop houses were being used for other purposes, or the landlords wanted them out?
I suppose there is.
Mm.
Look at us.
Hmm. Hmm.
We were evicted also, right?
Ah,
Technically.
okay. Tell us
Ah,
about that.
no, the Land Acquisition Act. No, but
Mm.
the people the eviction is because some of the shop houses belong to the government. I mean, URA, or I think it's land. I mean, SLA owns the houses, right?
Mm.
So when they wanted to develop the streets, this was early 1990s, late 1980s. So they have to, those who are tenants, they had to leave, right? Because the
Yeah.
government
Yeah.
redeveloping the place. So for a while, you lose out all these people. I mean, of course, our family, because we own the building, I mean the
Mm.
house. So it's like, yeah, it's we stay on. But a lot of our neighbors got, I
Mm.
won't say evicted out for whatever reason, or or even the landowners, they wanted to sell. Yeah, so
Mm.
they or to I don't exactly know, like, who owns what in Kampong Glam, but uh during like the late 1980s, late 1990s were the rejuvenation so-called process.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And they started. And obviously, if you're born in the 60s in Kampong Glam, by the time you are already an adult, so a lot of them, they want to move out and
Mm.
find their own places. So that was, why more and more people moved out.
Mm-mm. So there was also a kind of a push factor that people wanted to leave anyway, right? That
Yes.
the housing maybe was. Well, I mean, like what by the 80s, what was the physical state of the shop houses? Like if you look further south in Chinatown, a lot of the shop houses were not being maintained; they were decaying. In
Mm.
Kampong Glam, was it similar?
I think it was
Mm.
similar, but I won't say decay, like
Mm.
horrible gutter slum
Mm.
area decay. It's not, because I think Malays, we're very house proud.
Yeah.
That's a fact. So we always try to
Mm.
keep our living areas, or
Mm.
our places clean, and at least, okay, if it's run down because it just needed painting, but on the whole, it's not
Mm. Mm.
your ghetto slum decay.
Mm.
That was I mean, from what I see, it's more of like wear and tear kind of decay. But there were still people living in the house
Mm.
until like the last, uh maybe the grandmother or what, until she dies off, then they all move out.
Mm.
Yeah, so there were still people living, but let's say one family, maybe they are like 7 kids or something, or 4 or 5 kids in the house. And then the kids who are now adults, they all move out because they got married. So only leaving the parents or the grandparents
Mm.
there.
Mm.
So there were people still living there until either the landowner, like say, oh, I want to sell, or the government say, oh, we want to take this stretch to develop, then they leave. Yeah, this
Right,
is
right.
from what I see. But
Mm.
uh yeah, you could see that during that period, the government were actively trying to kind of rejuvenate the area, because it seems like quite dead. uh
Mm.
It
So
looks quite
they
big.
had
Except for Ramadan, you have the Ramadan
right.
Bazaar, which
Okay.
is, that everybody will come. Other than that, it is like,
Mm,
it's basically a residence. If you look around the area, it's more residential. The only commercial areas are like the Arab Street stretch. The rest of the other areas are mainly, residential. And if you do some sort of business, it's just in front of your house.